To know where we're going, we must remember where we're coming from. Boom. Never forget home.
Everyone wonders why I'm always jovial and happy. Every day, every time. At work, even under pressure. At play, always under control. Even with Bay, I always shine. And today, I get to share my secret companion, Best Kombucha. Gives me the energy but also boosting my immune system as I go by my day-to-day activities. Now you know.
Scoop it, mix it, shake it, or bake it. How you stay snacked up is up to you. Delight Grown Ups Family Cereal. Your day, your way.
Welcome to an electrifying new epic of agricultural shopping. Nestled in the bustling Lusaka showgrounds, the Nemchem Agri Division is more than just a store. It's the lighthouse of advancement, searching for top-notch biosecurity, cleaning and pest control solutions. Attention! Local businesses, your quest ends here. Get ready for a thrilling journey in agricultural retail. The future begins at Nemchem Agri Division, your supermarket for superior quality. The revolution of agricultural shopping starts now. It's about empowering your business and nurturing your community. Call us today or visit our shop at the Lusaka Showgrounds.
The meaning of life is not to simply exist, but to move ahead. To rise up and achieve. To conquer. Introducing Kung Fu Energy Drink, your push for the next conquests. Kung Fu Energy Drink. Master the power.
Guys, we need to upload this folder. But this system is not working. Where's this system? We have a deadline. This is already 11:50. Cindy, find us a better network now.
Hello, is that Fibercom? Okay.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. You're Superman.
I told you about Fibercom.
How did you know that?
It's the best.
Oh, it's Cindy. Anyway, she saved the day, and you were right.
See?
a bad day. When everything is bright and golden. Bad day. The sun is shining and the mighty morning. Bad day. Without my family in that moment, that day would have been a bad day.
Yeah, everyone's bad day is my bad day. But guess what? When my banja comes together, there are no bad days.
Banja washing powder, the family detergent.
Even when we are happy as a family, there is just that important family member missing. Hence, we had to do just the right thing. When we are sharing a meal, there is just that important part of the meal missing. Just Mega Pack, a gift for everyone. We are better together. Kukondwela Pamosi.
Chucky.
Yummy.
Chucky. Indulge your taste cravings with Chucky's bars, made with real chocolate and vanilla. Chucky's, munch on.
How do you deal with a relationship that is toxic? It may be like a friendship, a relationship, family.
With the way you're saying it, it almost sounds like she's being slaved, emotionally slaved.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for a man who's not able to walk with you in public, he has a problem. And I think he's cheating.
Maybe she's waiting, like women all the time, we wait for a man to tell us, hey, yo, I am done with you.
Yeah.
I think that's what she's waiting for. She knows deep down her heart that
He's done.
Is done.
I feel like a person can only draw the line themselves.
Yeah.
You can't tell a person to leave the toxic relationship until them themselves are tired. They're like, okay, fine, I've had enough. That's it. Now I'm back.
Imagine having nature's secrets to health and vitality in a bottle. Introducing Lifeway Shot Health Drink. Ginger for digestion. Beetroot for stamina. Aloe vera for skin. Tamarind for metabolism. Baobab for immune support. Lifeway Shot. Embrace wellness naturally.
The government of the Republic of Zambia, through the Ministry of Justice, has proposed a total of 13 constitutional amendments to be tabled under the anticipated Zambia Constitutional Amendment Bill of 2025. A 4-month roadmap has been unveiled, during which 1 month has been set aside specifically for public consultations and opportunity for citizens to engage in shaping the country's supreme law. As part of our special edition of Diamond Live series, we've dedicated this time up until the time that this process ends to break down these proposed constitutional amendments amendment by amendment. All the 13 that have been proposed, we're going to be breaking them down with different stakeholders, including civil society organizations, prominent individuals in this country, lawyers, as well as politicians, so that we can enhance the conversation around the constitutional amendments. On tonight's edition, we continue with the third proposal, which is the introduction of an electoral system that enhances representation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities in the National Assembly. Mumbi Namwana is governance activist. She's joining us via video conference. Thank you so much, Mumbi, for joining me tonight on this program. Well, in studio, I'm joined in by chairperson of the Consortium for Civil Society Organizations. He was also former NDF spokesperson Isaac Mwansa. Comrade Isaac Mwansa, good evening. Thank you so much for making time to be with us on tonight's edition.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Well, you could be a part of the conversation by calling us on the number that is reflecting on your screen, but also this stream is live on the Facebook page. That's at Diamond TV Online. You can be a part of the conversation by going to our Facebook stream and commenting your perspective as well as your contribution regarding the proposed constitutional amendment number 3, which is the introduction of an electoral system that enhances representation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Let me begin off with you. Before we can get to this, very specific amendment, I'd like to take you back to the speech of the Minister of Justice, Honorable Princess Kasune, when she was making a presentation of these 13 proposed amendments. She used one particular term that has become very controversial, that all these 13 amendments are non-contentious. That's the reason for why we are dealing, with them. Let's begin from there. Would you agree that the 13 proposals are non-contentious?
Yeah, so in our view, we as a consortium of civil society organization gave a statement to talk about the provisions that are contentious and non-contentious. There are certain provisions amongst the 13 which are contentious. For instance, the provision on parliamentarians getting back into the councils is a contentious provision. The provision on removing the numbers of members of parliament who are nominated by the president is a contentious provision. And also the provision to an extent of ensuring that we remove the resignation, what happens when a person resigns, and then how do you replace a person who has resigned? That remains contentious depending on the proposal that will be put on the table on how you are going to replace such a candidate who resigns, how a political party can replace such a candidate. So, in our view, the majority of the provisions that have been proposed are non-contentious. They come from way back, and the provision that we are discussing today, in particular, you will notice that it's a non-contentious provision. It was there during when the people were making submissions, during the Mungomba Constitutional Review Commission. The Zambian people spoke and they said, we want to have a proportional representation system, which allows men, women, youths, and persons with disabilities to be in parliament and councils. It went up to the NDF, the technical committee, and the NDF. All these processes, they adopted that provision as a non-contentious provision. So what makes a provision contentious, for instance, is it that the Zambian people have spoken about it, and what the Zambian people say about the provision that you are proposing? Or is it that the provision has just come from nowhere and you have just decided to say, this is what we want to do? For instance, when you talk about that provision, which I said was contentious, getting the ministers, the MPs back into parliament. The Zambian people spoke, and they were unanimous when they said, no, we need to remove MPs from councils because it is compromising the separation of powers. So you as the legislators, you come back and say, no, we want to go back into the councils. It makes the provision contentious on its own. So in our view, the majority of them are non-contentious. Some of the provisions come from the court. The courts have made decisions where they have enjoined Parliament to say Parliament must be able to attend to provisions that must be removed from the Constitution because they've either become odious or they were inserted without regard to other provisions which they are conflicting. For instance, ministers staying in office is in the Constitution. And the court said, can you remove this provision? And this administration has come to us and say, we want to remove this provision. So how contentious can that be? It is non-contentious because the Zambian people spoke that they don't want ministers to remain in office. So for us, we can categorize provisions that are contentious and provisions that are non-contentious.
Although other people still argue that the term contentious is very subjective, and that's the reason for why I want to bring in Mumbi into this conversation. Mumbi, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Well, let's pick it up from there, where Isaac Mwansa left it. Do you think that the 13 proposed constitutional amendments, as in accordance to what the minister said, are all non-contentious?
Thank you very much for that question, Andrew. And to some technical changes, but then all of us, back to us, and I think all the provisions are non-contentious. Firstly, we have to look at who describes what contentious is. And when they were coming up with these and deeming them non-contentious, who was in the background and creating these provisions and finally coming up with these ones and believing that they're actually non-contentious? So already just the beginning of the process itself is not given enough leeway for people to have the comfort and confidence to say this is non-contentious. So as things stand, the idea of non-contentious, we want to believe is a belief of the government, seeing that the Minister of Justice communicated this, that she believes, and the government, I'm sure, believes that these provisions are non-contentious, then they are the only ones believing it. As far as stakeholders are concerned, I don't think a sufficient number that we would trust and believe that can be used as a measure of stakeholder engagement was achieved. That's if any were consulted. But for me, I do not believe that they're non-contentious. I think it's a mixture of issues. There's some issues that we find very important, which we feel are continuous discussions that require our attention, that have existed for a long time. For example, is a topic that we're having tonight, the particular proposal that we're focusing on tonight. It's one that has been there for years. Almost in every constitutional review process, this issue keeps coming up. And so we do agree that it's a critical conversation that must be had. And preferably by now, we should be reaching conclusions 60 years down the line, but we haven't. So that, of course, is something we should as an important conversation. But for the rest of the provisions, I am not sure at what was used to say it's non-contentious, but I think factors that would speak to supporting that position are not sufficient. There's no stakeholder engagement, sufficient rather stakeholder engagement. There was no process where we saw the civil society themselves coming up and saying, oh, these are things we feel like we should address. And we're seeing them appear. Of course, one or two, but really, it's not enough looking at critical issues that they wanted to see as being amended.
Well, we seem to be having a technical challenge there, but just from where Mumbi also, Mr. Mwansa, has left it, there's a belief that this process of constitutional amendments cannot fully be supported by stakeholders because it seemingly deems to be started by government. I know you've heard of these conversations.
Yeah.
What should be the right process in terms of starting a constitutional amendment process?
So I think I've heard this for a longer period of time, and this has always come from civil society and political parties, where we have argued constantly to say that no, we need a people-driven constitution. But we must be able to appreciate that there are two things that we are talking about here, Andrew. Constitutional amendment and constitutional making process are two different things. When we talk about constitutional making, we are talking about making a new constitution. Means that the entire constitution, you want to repeal it and make a constitution. And that's what we have been doing since 1973. We have been trying to make a new constitution. And when you are making a new constitution, the people must broadly be engaged in the process, because it is a new constitution. And you realize that Article 5.2 of our constitution states that the people are the sovereign. we have supreme power as a people. When we have this power, we exercise it either directly or indirectly through our members of parliament. Now, that Article 5.2 also tells you to say that when power has not been allocated to any institution, a state organ or institution, it is reserved for the people. So the power to make a constitution, a new constitution, has not been allocated even to parliament. They do not have that power. And that is why we have been having the constitutional reform processes where the CRC is appointed to ensure that you gather broader consensus from the people. But it is different when you are doing a constitutional amendment. The people themselves have allocated that function to Parliament and the executive. Now, who initiates the process? I think that's your question. How should the process be initiated? To change a constitution, any provision of the constitution, you and me, Andrew, can initiate that process of making an amendment to the constitution. And a member of parliament can initiate the process to make an amendment to the constitution. The government can initiate a process to make an amendment to the constitution. That is what the law says when you read Article 89 of the Constitution. So you can propose an amendment to the law, which includes the constitution itself, as a citizen. But when you propose that amendment, it must meet the benchmark of constitutional amendment process, which is guided by Article 79. Article 79 will require that amendment that you are proposing, you must have it published 30 days, at least 30 days, before you introduce it in Parliament. Why do you publish for 30 days? It is because you want at least stakeholders to buy in. Okay? 30 days is not just proposed in the Constitution for no reason. No. It is proposed to allow stakeholders to buy in. And what is expected when you're making an amendment is limited people's participation. You need stakeholders. Of course, you need civil society organizations. You need the church. You need all key stakeholders to be consulted. That consultation is different from the time when you're making a new constitution where you require all Zambians because you are now making a new constitution. So the level of engagement, the level of participation is different when you're making a new constitution or when you're amending a constitution.
So it's not wrong to say that this particular process is driven by government, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing
wrong with it. And I will tell you that Parliament itself has always asked Parliament to say, you as Parliament, you know, when we went during the PF regime, when the minister overstayed in office, it's a court that told Parliament to say, can you amend this provision of the Constitution? It was never amended because Parliament did not initiate that process. But later on, when we started the process at the NDF, we wanted to ensure that we clean up that provision in the Constitution because the court had said Parliament is supposed to do that. So the current process is not flawed, as people are saying. The only thing that we have constantly reminded our government is that they cannot do this process single-handedly. There must be some limited engagement with stakeholders, not just having forums and all those where there is no structured way of trying to make input by the people. You have proposed amendments. What the government should have done was to constitute a committee, a form of a committee, which should go to the stakeholders to say, these are the proposals. What is your input? When the stakeholders have made their input, then you are able to take it to publish it and then take it to Parliament. That is different from going around the country like a CRC. Okay? And this process is marked by best practice, Andrew. In South Africa, I'll tell you this, South Africa has amended their constitution 18 times from 1996. What process have they used? The same process which is in our constitution here is what is in the South African constitution. So how do they do the consultation? They do the consultation in a structured manner where the National Council of Provinces are consulted. So there is that level of consultation which is limited consultation, which is what we see lacking in this process. And that is why for us as a consortium, we have insisted to the government to say there must be limited consultation, structured consultation, not just anybody talking. You know, another person is talking that side, another one is talking that. Those are not consultations. Consultations must be structured. They must be limited. So much as we have dismissed the idea to say that no, people are saying there must be broad consultation, government must have nothing to do with it. No, that's not correct. Government can initiate the process. The executive has the power to do that. But what is expected from the executive is that they are going to have a structured way to ensure that they can get the input of the stakeholders. And so with us, we expected that the Minister of Justice or the President himself should have established a committee to get these structured dialogues, structured matters. If you are holding, for instance, as Diamond TV, you'll be holding a forum. There must have been a committee to listen to what is happening there and take note. So that when you are now making the final product, you know to say the people that sat in this committee, they agreed to say, I think the issues that were coming out, this is what is supposed to go into the bill. That process is missing. And for us, the limited consultation is important. Again, I want to implore the Ministry of Justice that it is not too late for you to do limited consultations which are structured, not these haphazard which we are seeing, where everybody is talking. You know, civil society has found manners to ensure that they can hold these events. Who are you talking to? You are not talking to anyone. There must be somebody that must be talked to. So that those people should be able to say, I think this is non-contentious. This is what the people, generally the stakeholders, have said. So we must be very clear here. We are dismissing the position where people are saying the people must lead the process. This is an amendment. The people can suggest. Government can suggest. Members of parliament can suggest. But how you go afterwards is very important. You must look at best practice also in the region.
Let's pick the thoughts of Mumbi. Mumbi, you are so strong, especially, I remember vividly, even during the constitutional amendment Bill 10, number 10 of 2019, you are very critical on ensuring that, for you believe that, the process protects the content. And so far, you are of the considered view that this process is flawed. Why would you say the process is flawed? And why aren't you not trusting this process that has been started by government? Mumbi? Are you on the line, Mumbi? Are you able to hear me, Mumbi? Seem to be having a technical challenge on that, but we're still going to be having, Mumbi on the line. You clearly said, Mr. Mwansa, that it's very important, for government to come, to the Minister of Justice particularly, to come up with a framework that, will ensure that there's a structured way in how, they collect these submissions that come from, from stakeholders. The Minister has provided a clear roadmap on how this will be done. It's going to be done within a space of 4 months. Do you believe this is sufficient time?
So in terms of the constitutional amendment process, I don't think that it has a definite timeline on how you can come up with an amendment. The only thing that is provided is Article 79 itself provides for the procedure. And this procedure is that first you need at least 30 days, a minimum of 30 days, to have these amendments published and for the people to make their input to those amendments. And then you take them to Parliament. The process at Parliament, if she has deemed that 2 months we can do that process in Parliament, well and good. If we have that time to do it in 2 months, well and good. I don't see a reason why you cannot make an amendment within 60 days or within 90 days. when you have published the proposal, okay? So the process is provided. People that say, no, we need a process which will protect content. What process do we need? What process do we need? When the Constitution has given you the process, they line up to say this is the process that you are going to follow. So it's the people that decided to say that as we have tapanga constitution, we have given this constitution, we have made this constitution. But now when you want to amend the constitution that we have made, we have given you the power as parliament to say, as long as you do 1, 2, 3, 4, then you can amend the provision. And 2 is that when do you involve the people? You involve the people both in the committees in parliament. You know there will be a parliamentary committee. At that stage, the bill is in parliament. You need to involve the people. But before the bill even goes into parliament, at the proposal stage, the 30 days have been earmarked, at least 30 days. It's not like it's 30 days limited. No, at least 30 days. You publish it so that people can also begin to make the comments on it. So I would commend government. I would commend government sincerely for telling us to say these are the proposals that we are going to put on the table. But they should have gone further to ensure that we have a structured way in which these discussions should have been happening. And that is a missing link. That is a missing link in the process. So what government has done and the time frame of 4 months or 5 months, to me, I think it's sufficient to make an amendment. And 2, I know there will be these questions to say, because of an election.
We're going to come to that. Let's see if we can to engage Mumbi. Mumbi, are you able to hear me? Mumbi Namwana. Well, in case you're joining us, you are watching a special edition of Diamond Live, where we've been discussing the different constitutional amendments, that have been proposed by government. There are 13 proposed amendments. We started this 2 weeks ago. We discussed the first amendment. We discussed last week the second amendment, and today we are on the third amendment. On Friday, we are discussing the fourth amendment. The idea is to ensure that we break down these amendments and possibly look at the implication, for all these amendments, on the lives of our people. Mumbi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Andrew. I'm so sorry. I'm having very serious technical difficulties, but I'm following through the conversation.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the process that has been undertaken. The roadmap was provided for by government. Do you trust that this process, is going to give us a constitution that we desire? Earlier on, before your line was breaking, we were discussing how it is important, for the process to protect the content. And I was reminding people that you were very keen when we were discussing issues around Bill 10 and how you strongly opposed Bill 10 because you believe the process was not right. Let's talk about the process, for these constitutional amendments. Do you agree with the process that has been suggested so far?
Unfortunately, Andrew, we don't agree. I do not agree. And the business thing is when we were having about the constitution.
Let's see if we can try fix that sound. We're going to take a short break. When we're back, we see if we can fix that technical challenge that we're having.
To know where we're going, we must remember where we're coming from. Boom. Never forget home.
Umubamabamo watulile ngoma. Consistency enables one to achieve his or her goals. But that responsibility comes with its own challenges.
When that time of the month comes, it's never easy, but I must be ready.
Ukunkala kwangu pano padera, nosebenzera abana. Masiku yanangu, yomvwika bwino. Lomba yakini, umvwika lini bwino.
They say you look after wealth, but knowledge looks after you.
In all my years as a wife and as a mother,
something always had my back in painful times.
For fevers, headaches, muscle aches, and backaches, the recommendation is
Panadol.
Panadol.
Panadol. Pharmanova, saving lives since 1980.
The meaning of life is not to simply exist, but to move ahead. To rise up and achieve. To conquer. Introducing Kung Fu Energy Drink, your push for the next conquests. Kung Fu Energy Drink. Master the power.
It's time for the main event. This is incredible. He has written it, and the dream lives on. I cannot believe it.
Stay connected to DSTV this April and May and get all the football finals you want.
As easy as 1, 2, 3, and all my clothes are squeaky clean.
Quick to remove the dirt and stains, and the fresh fragrance remains.
Never seen nothing like it, that's exactly why I like it.
So whether color white or black, it brings a new right back.
How do you deal with a relationship that is toxic? It may be like a friendship, a relationship, family.
With the way you're saying it, it almost sounds like she's being slaved, emotionally slaved.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for a man who's not able to walk with you in public, he has a problem. And I think he's cheating.
Maybe she's waiting, like women all the time, we wait for a man to tell us, hey, yo, I am done with you.
Yeah.
I think that's what she's waiting for. She knows deep down her heart that this thing is done.
I feel like a person can only they can draw the line themselves.
Yeah.
You can't tell a person to leave the toxic relationship until themselves are tired. They're like, okay, fine, I've had enough. That's it. Now I'm back.
Scoop it, mix it, shake it, or bake it. How you stay snacked up is up to you. Delight Grown-Ups Family Cereal. Your day, your way.
Thanks so much for still staying with us. We sincerely apologize for that technical glitch in our connectivity, but nonetheless, we continue with the program. Today, we're focusing on Constitutional Amendment number 3, which is the introduction of an electoral system that enhances representation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities in the National Assembly. I'm privileged this evening to be joined in by former NDF spokesperson, Comrade Isaac Mwansa, as well as governance activist in Mumbi, Namwana. I hope you can hear me now, Mumbi.
Hi, Andrew. I can hear you now.
Fantastic. Just before we cut, you were giving your position on how you don't agree with this process that government has embarked on in terms of constitutional amendments.
Oh, yes. So I think earlier on, you see, the interesting part about the process is not about the selective application of when you want to select this part of the law. I think it's also important to look at the content that they're trying to amend and really ask if you can leave it as a preserve of what the government will determine as fit for consultation. But also important to recognize is that my colleague seated there also did mention some of the critical things that he himself has not seen. Even the extent of the limit that is being described as the government should limit the consultation to this extent has not been seen. So it's just not about telling everybody, oh, can every citizen be here and can this happen, which, if anything, is a better approach when it comes to touching the Constitution. But even the most minimum that we expect to happen, just inviting critical stakeholders like political parties, civil society, and other critical institutions, even institutions like labs, we have not seen anything like that. So that itself makes the whole process questionable. Had it been that there was a discussion period, even to just identify which provisions we're going to look at and amend, I think there would have been an extent of appreciation. But this does not eliminate the need for wide consultation among critical stakeholders to this conversation, whether it's just an amendment or an entire constitutional creation process. So it is still not justified. And the fact that these voices have still been left out, which we know that for the longest time have been contributing to the creation and amendment of constitutions, is worrisome to trust that the content we have been given is truly having the interest of the public. And like I said, if at all there was any consideration of these stakeholders, I think we would have seen certain provisions that were of interest from the beginning, such as talking about limiting the presidential powers when it comes to certain action would have been there. But looking at the provisions we have been given now and seeing them being fronted as a necessity for amendment of the Constitution, surely we can tell that there is a gap somewhere in communicating between the government and the relevant stakeholders that usually contributes to this process, whether it's on an amendment stage with limited consultation or it's at constitutional creation stage where we require wider consultation all the way up to grassroots and citizens.
Mr. Mwansa, another issue that has come out to be very prominent, of debate in these issues is that we are very close to an election. Why can't we wait for the 2026 elections, before we proceed and amend our constitution? Do you think this is a valid conversation?
So I don't know why there's that jittery from stakeholders about these amendments and being close to an election year. In my view, reforms can happen at any other period of time. And I say this, Andrew, because I've studied constitutional reform, and the constitutional law is something that I love, I treasure so much. Every day I get to study that. So I've looked at constitutional reform in various jurisdictions, and I can tell you that every other jurisdiction where they have made these changes, they've been done even in an election year. It would be desirable not to make them before an election year, but there is nothing that stops us from changing something if it is going to add value to an election. For instance, when you are going to introduce a mixed member proportional representation, which will bring in the women, the youths, and the disabled into parliament, why would you oppose such an amendment, even if it's a 1 year before an election year? So for me, it's about the intention. You know, there's been a lot of malice about the process at some point to say, we heard, no, the president wants to increase the term limit, and this and that. But now government has given us the proposals to say, this is what we are proposing to amend. There's another conspiracy theory which says, no, immediately they remove the mayors, the term limit for the mayors, then they also do it for the president. We must realize one thing, Andrew. The only amendment that can be done to the Constitution is an amendment that has been published in a gazette. If Parliament wants to make any changes to the Constitution which has not been published in a government gazette, as required by Article 79, it cannot pass into Parliament. And it can be challenged in court. And the court itself stated in one of the cases of Godfrey Mianda to say that if the process of Article 79 has not been adhered to, then the court has the power to set that amendment aside. So the idea to say that they can sneak in an amendment in the process, maybe at committee stage, that they can sneak in amendment. So the amendments that can only go into Parliament are those that have been published in a gazette. Those ones, you can even change them here and there, you can fine-tune them. There's no problem with that. But you cannot just wake up and again say, no, we also forgot to publish this amendment. The law requires that you publish it. So if we are going to change an amendment which was not published, government has a duty to go back and publish the same amendment. That is how it works in constitutional reform.
What do you think this mistrust is coming from? Because I think these are some of the points of defense that you had even when you were advocating that Bill 10 should pass. Where do you think this jittery and mistrust is coming from, Mr. Mwansa?
You know, Zambians, we have been failing to make a new constitution for a longer period of time. I think Zambians have been wanting a new constitution. And so we are used to an idea of the people-driven constitution. You understand? Eh? So we want to always lead as a people. We always want to say we are the ones who are supposed to lead the process, forgetting that these are the two different things. So when you're not involved, definitely people begin to mistrust and say, why is government taking this route minus the people? You understand? Eh? So we have also not explained to the Zambian people very well the difference between a constitutional making and a constitutional amendment process and the level of engagement. When do we make a new constitution? When do we amend a constitution? These are the things that have missed us in the whole process. And that is why even some of our colleagues in civil society, even lawyers, by the way, you would find them talking about the same issue of a people-driven, broader consultation. It is because we are used to the process being told to us to say it must be broader consultation. But when you read, a seasoned lawyer will know to say there is a difference between an amendment and making of the constitution in terms of engagement of the people.
Mumbi, you for a long time as a young person, you've been advocating through different organizations that you've been affiliated to, the Youth for Parliament and other organizations, that we need young people to go in Parliament. We need young people to be at the, at the table of decision making. Doesn't this proposal excite you as a young woman and as a young person that one day seeks to be, to be a leader? Mumbi?
Well, Andrew, before I even get to that, maybe just to give a bit of feedback from what my good comrade is from submitting there. I don't think the issue here or the debate is whether it's a constitutional amendment or constitutional making process. What we are saying is the bare minimum that is expected for consultation, whether it's an amendment or it's a constitutional making process, has not been seen. Perhaps the comrade can confirm to us that he was among the few that, were privileged as a member coming from an organization consortium, can confirm to us that they were actually called and they did contribute to these provisions that we're seeing here today. And of course, coming from a civil society organization, we would have appreciated to have, heard from our comrades that such a process was being undertaken, even in the limited, in the suggested limited levels where they're saying, okay, if it's an amendment and there is a certain level of participation that is expected and it's not every citizen. We are not saying it will be, but what we're saying is the minimum expected standard that we thought was reached, just reaching civil society, political parties, and certain critical stakeholders that speak to this particular conversation was not reached. So it doesn't matter how it will be. The minimum standard has not been seen, it has not been experienced, and there's no amount of explanation of whether it's an amendment or constitutional making process will justify the fact that that process was missed, and it does not provide sufficient grounds for people to feel confident in the process to amend the Constitution. Coming to your question, does it make me happy as a young person who of young people, women, and people living with disability? Andrew, this has been a fight we have been fighting for a very, very long time. From the inception of Zambia's constitution, this conversation has existed. From the beginning of the women's movement, the earliest recorded women's movement in Zambia as early as 1972 to date, these are conversations that we've been having. Young people have been on the front line of escorting politicians and political parties into power, but we do not see them being coached to the decision-making tables. We have not seen marginalized groups like people living with disabilities sitting on those decision-making tables and begin to direct their own future, of course, co-creating this future with other leaders. So, of course, this is a needed action. However, Andrew, the coming of this, the demand for this, does not in any way mean that we must allow for any other provision that we're uncomfortable with to come as part of the package just because we're getting this. I think it's a great injustice that we would be doing to the country, but also it's a form of if I would like a better term, a form of an insight to this particular group that did not just want to be included, but wanted a constitution that can represent the people at large. So if they wanted to do this in what we call good faith, when it comes to the law, when it comes to whether we're interpreting or we're putting the law, and they wanted to practice this using good faith, they did not have to include a flawed process, but also they shouldn't have added other provisions which are costing this particular provision. Because as we speak, when we look at the provisions that we're uncomfortable with and we say, okay, this provision should fall, and it costs falling of the entire bill, it means even this particular provision falls. So I do not see the genuineness, because it's been tangled in a flawed process, but also it's been put together with provisions which, if we say this bill falls, even this particular provision that is now no longer looking like it's fair consideration, but a dangling carrot to put together the women, the young people, and people living with disability to support this process and amendment. So, yes, it's a necessary conversation, it's a necessary change. Affirmative action is critical to bringing equality. However, the current process is unfair, and just getting this provision is not enough. People want a proper constitution, not just the one which will have this provision, but it should be able to deliver across different issues, the economic, the social, and the political sector. So adding provisions that could risk even this particular benefit that we want is not fair, and I don't think that is creating a constitution in good faith that is able to represent the interests of the people.
Mr. Mwansa, if this has been a submission that has consistently been there in almost all the almost all the constitution reviews, why haven't we taken it up?
Very good question, Andrew. Very, very good question. Just to give an answer before I give the answer to you, I think she has asked me about whether we have been engaged in this process of trying to come up with these amendments. And I think the public needs to know that we have been part of the constitutional amendment process ourselves for a longer period of time. The folly is when people stay away from the process, is that you end up not contributing as much as you can do. 2016, Andrew, I'll give you an example of 2016. Everybody, most of the people stayed away from that process. They wanted that bill to collapse. They wanted that bill to collapse.
I was writing bills.
So if the bill was going to collapse in 2016, would we have at the 50% plus one? Would we have at the running mate? Today we're talking about these beautiful provisions which are in the Constitution, because some of us took the challenge seriously to go to Parliament and say, this is what we want, this is not what we want. As to whether we have been engaged in this process before, in the current process, the answer for me is that personally I've been to court several times to try and challenge certain provisions in the Constitution. For instance, the issue of resignation of a candidate. We have been to court. Our partner Gears initiative, they have been to court over Article 52.6. And the courts have pronounced themselves on it. That is also one layer of engagement that you can talk about. But where we have been called to say, come and sit down and submit proposals, the answer is no. And I totally agree with her. And it was me who suggested, who actually brought to light that there must be the limited engagement. That engagement has not been seen. And me and her, we agree that government can do better by putting in a structured way of engaging the people in the process. So there's no doubt about that. There is a gap that we can agree here to say this is a gap, and we hope that government is going to take steps to clear this gap up.
And this gap is very important.
It's very, very important. The gap is very, very important. And for me and the consortium, we have been very clear on that, to say that there must be an engagement. We even wrote to the Minister of Justice before they even told us which proposals they are bringing on the table. We told them to say, can you set up a committee that will ensure that we have a structured way of bringing in our positions on the issues that you want to bring. They said, no, we're the Electoral Reform Technical Committee. No, the Electoral Reform Technical Committee, Baba, is not a constitutional review committee. They had no mandate to try and review a constitution. That is agreed. So for us, I think that the process is still there. Now, why have we failed to bring in coming back to your answer, the 50% plus one? The answer is in here. In 2016, this is what the PF said. Honorable Sembiakula, let me read what he said in Parliament, verbatim. He said this: Mr. Chairperson, I indicated that we on the right side are not discarding the principle of mixed member proportional representation. We are merely saying we should shelve this for the time being due to various reasons such as cost implication and others, and that this matter be reflected upon by the Zambian people either through a referendum or any other means. So this is not the end of the principle of mixed member proportional representation. For now, we are merely shelving it for further consultation and reflection. I thank you, sir. This is what he said, 2016. When did we do some reflection on this provision of mixed member proportional representation? Between 2016 and 2019, we had all these consultations that were going on the mixed member. The UPND supported the mixed member. The PF, as we have said here, they supported it. They simply said we needed more consultation. I was privileged to chair to be appointed by the Secretary Generals of these political parties in Siavonga, where they said, no, since we are all stakeholders, you are neutral, can you chair this meeting of the Secretary Generals? I sat in that meeting, hearing them debate on these provisions, and agreement was there to ensure that we have the mixed member proportional representation. That is why it went into Bill 10. Now, you know why Bill 10 collapsed. The same discussions that we are having today. So, if we go the same route of trying to say, let us oppose everything in the bill, we will not be making progress. We made progress in 2016, despite our colleagues having said they don't want to have anything to do with that bill in 2016. We made progress. Today, people are defending this very constitution. They refused. Okay? There's no harm in that. But what we are saying again is that let us not waste this opportunity. If we can have women, youths, and the marginalized in parliament, that would be good enough. We can work together as civil society, those who are agreeing and those who are opposing, to show government to say this provision, we disagree with it, like we have stated ourselves. To say we disagree with members of parliament going back into the councils. That is contentious. What is non-contentious, Andrew, in place of that provision? What has been non-contentious is ministers to be appointed from outside the parliament. That has been the core. UPND agreed with it when they were in the opposition. PF, they also said, no, I think we're just shelving it. Yep. So the Zambian people, it has never been contentious for ministers to be appointed from outside parliament. So we can tell government to say, can we replace this provision with appointment of ministers from outside parliament?
What is the difference with the quota system and with this system that we're trying to, the proportional representation, from your understanding? And how would you suggest it works well to ensure that what we're trying to achieve is achieved?
So from history, I've learned a lot from electoral experts. I'm not an electoral expert, but I've learned a lot from them. But also hearing the Zambian people debate the quota system and the mixed member proportional representation. The quota system was rejected even at NDF by members of parliament, for a simple reason that the quota system simply reserves the seats for women, youth, and the marginalized without much competition. So they would be getting into parliament without competing even amongst themselves. The mixed member proportional representation system, which is what Kenya is using currently, you have the seats that are reserved quite okay. Okay? They are reserved seats where women only compete, where youths only compete, where the disabled only compete. Okay, those are safer seats, they're called safer seats. That system is what was adopted under during the NDF. It was the same system that was adopted under the technical committee that drafted the constitution. It was the same system that was proposed by the Mumbi Commission for a reason that it allows women to compete as well. So they don't just come into parliament without a competition. But you can have a quota system where you have a closed party list system. When an election has taken place, people have campaigned, the political party has been has won a number of seats, and they have a number of votes which are due to them. Then you can use the percentage to calculate how many women from that political party can go into parliament without being subjected to an election themselves. It happens in South Africa. You understand that? So the system that we are suggesting, which has been an agreed position for the Zambian people, whether it was during Mungomba time or the Constitutional Reform Review Commissions and the Technical Committee, has been a mixed member proportional representation where women are going to compete in the safer seats. For instance, safer seats, how does it work? You have 156 seats currently that we have, where members, anyone can compete, even the women can compete. But the proposal was to create 10 more seats in each province. Then we had I think we had the 9 seats. We're talking about 90 more seats. Now we have 10 provinces. So you are roughly talking about 100 more seats. Out of these 100 seats, 10 seats in each provinces, you allocate some for women, like 5 seats for women. You allocate for the youths 3 seats. You allocate 2 seats for persons with disabilities. You are assured that at the end of the day, you are going to have a good number, at least a minimum of 50 members of parliament who are women in parliament. You are assured of having 30 members who are youth. You are assured of 20 members who are disabled in parliament when you adopt that system. Would they have come using the back door? No. They would have competed in that election, either with their political party sponsoring them and helping them to campaign so that they win those seats. It is an advantage to both this a democracy and also empowering the marginalized. So for me, and from what I've heard constantly, members of parliament would never agree to a situation where they feel they'll be campaigning themselves and the youths are going to want to go into parliament at the back, at the sweat of those who had campaigned. They would want also them to participate in the campaigns, to run for their seats and ensure that they get into parliament on merit that have been elected by the people. So that is a system that has been proposed. When you read this report, the Hansard, UPND was very strong on it. PF was very strong. Even at NDF, PF agreed and said the mixed member proportional representation is the best way to go. So now getting back to it is that why do we need stakeholders to participate in determining this system? This system is not for government. You need political parties, you need civil society, you need the church, so that they can make an input to say, is this a system that we are still going to go with after this amendment? Because we have a shorter period of time between now and 2016. So it is possible to agree with the stakeholders to say, we are still going by the system that we agreed. How do we do it? It shouldn't be left, it shouldn't be a government process where they say, this is what we are agreeing to ourselves. The principles are agreed, but they are the nitty-gritties of how it will work. You need the stakeholders. From the beginning.
Let me get to hear from you, Mumbi. Do you have a suggested way, that this could work? Do we need to tailor-make something? I know that there's a number of countries in Africa that are using the system, even outside Africa, that are using the mixed member representation, system. Do we need to tailor-make our own, or perhaps we can adopt from the already existing systems from other countries? If this is to pass, of course.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And Mrs. Zambia has always had a suggested method on how we can co-create this parliament that would be inclusive. And of course, agreeing with Mr. Mwansa, all the constitutional amendments we've done, especially the most recent ones, that even if they didn't pass, we do have those provisions and we do have those processes. And even that in itself, I think we keep saying it's a whole different conversation altogether, but that can only happen also if we know certain specifics. For example, in the current case that we're having, the minister did mention that some of these provisions that speak to delimitation, that speak to the inclusion of these marginalized groups would be decided upon once the Electoral Reforms Committee gives a report on delimitation, which was done, should be on the 22nd of April. However, when you look at the way this process has been carried out, while there are suggestions in these other review commissions, we realize that at this point there is a gap, because the same stakeholders that today we are not including and have continuously contributed to the previously proposed processes in the other commissions, today they are not being consulted. So we do not know what's in the Electoral Reforms Committee report on delimitation, because it was released on the 22nd, and on the 23rd, the Ministry of Justice started formulating the bill. So on what to make that prescription of inclusion. Of course, here we can sit, Andrew, and discuss different methods. Is this going to be mixed member election system? Is this going to be mixed member proportional system? All those are there, and when it comes to choosing, we obviously have to sit again and decide which one we're going to feel is best. But so far, we already have a solution. When we go to the Mumbi Review Commission, you will find a solution there. But right now, what is in that Electoral Committee report on delimitation that the Ministry of Justice is using, recommending an electoral system and a claimed inclusive electoral system that we're going to see in the bill? So for me, the process is not the problem. We will get there. We will talk about it. We have had sufficient suggestions that we can pick from. But for now, what we are supposed to use as a basis is unknown to the public. And that in itself is a problem. So I hope we can be able to see how at different stages this process keeps getting flowed. You release a report that you will use, as a basis of making the bill, but the report is not public. So it's also going to be a surprise. But away from all those processes that are being suggested that we could use, Andrew, I think there's also a question of why aren't we using the existing mechanism for undertaking the process of inclusion in decision-making processes? I think the Constitution has provided quite a number of articles that the President and different appointing powers can utilize, and they have continuously missed this opportunity. And it's just not the current government, it's also the previous government. But what's more disappointing is that even now, when we needed them to utilize this provision, such as Article 69 of the Constitution on nominating MPs, such as Article 231 on enacting the Gender Commission, such 259 on nomination and appointments, all these have been left hanging. If really there was a true intention to see that we are pushing for gender equality across all sectors, and especially from the government's end, who are given, this responsibility example to the public, we should have utilized these provisions. We still don't see young people in these spaces, despite even the president himself having this privilege in Article 69. Of course, I do agree there is what we see as a global clause there, where it gives the president this option where he sees or she sees necessary. But even that necessary has not been described. But even if Andrew, okay, fine, it's not described. You are telling me the president in this entire 4 years has not seen anywhere where it has been necessary that we achieve gender equality.
As we conclude with you,
he did not see.
As we conclude with you, Mumbi,
given mechanisms that are supposed to be used.
As we conclude with you, Mumbi, how much of a need,
and to also ensure that all institutions, especially government institutions, are abiding by the belief of gender equality.
As we conclude with you, Mumbi, as we conclude with you,
the enactment of the Gender Commission.
Yeah.
Now, the Gender Commission was established under the Gender Equity and Equality Act of 2014. And we were talking about this commission from 2015. Andrew, this is 2025, years later. That commission has never sniffed a light. Not once, not even as a suspicion, not even as a commitment. Of course, we have seen all these measures being taken. Okay, we've taken the Office of Gender under the Office of the President. Yes, thank you. Look, it is not sufficient. The law has provided for mechanisms that should be utilized, and they are still being ignored. So all these are missed opportunities to begin to bring this to reality. You cannot come and convince us something that you are failing to practice.
Thank you,
You are preaching, but you're failing to.
Thank you, Mumbi. How much of a need?
The government has in their hands
thank you,
to
Mumbi.
utilize and show us that, look, comrades, citizens, we are trying to push for this, and it's not giving us the effective results that we want to see. Therefore, we are asking that we use affirmative action and start this particular provision Constitution and ensure that this becomes law instead of a condition that is in the hands of an appointing power. So already that in itself is a gap.
Thank you,
that
Mumbi.
in itself again is a contribution.
As we conclude, Mr. Mwansa, how much of a need is this before the next election?
So
this amendment, how much of it is a need before the next election?
We need to clear one or two issues in the Constitution. For instance, we need women, youths, and persons who are disabled to find themselves in Parliament through a provision that guarantees them in the Constitution that they can be in Parliament. We need to remove provisions which the courts themselves have said, can you remove this provision from the Constitution? It has been long overdue. It should have been done way back, as far back as 2017. But it was never done. When are we going to do it? So for me, there's need for us to look at the Constitution. There's need for the government to come together and bring the stakeholders and say, how do we move forward with these amendments? I think government should have nothing to fear by engaging stakeholders at the barest minimum, and allow these stakeholders to do various consultation and say, this is the way to go. I think President Hakainde Hichilema would receive a lot of kudos from the Zambian people if he's going to bring these stakeholders on board and we agree on what provisions we should not find themselves in and which ones should get in. I think there will be no contention about amending the constitution even in the next 2 months or so. That is what we are looking for.
Thanks a lot for coming through and speaking to the Zambian people about this very important aspect of the amendment process.
Thank you very much for hosting us on this platform.
All right, see you again on Friday for Constitutional Amendment number 4. On behalf of the entire production crew, thank you so much for watching. My name is Andrew Mwansa.